Hi everyone, welcome you all. In this video, I'm talking about TestNG listeners, and this is also one of the important feature from TestNG. So let's start with what are TestNG listeners. So basically, while automating your test cases, right? So normally we have a test case. So test case contains a number of test methods. So there's a test method 1, and there's a test method 2, and so on. So after executing this particular test case, so maybe these test methods may be passed or failed, or sometimes they may be skipped, right? So based on the status of these test methods, I want to perform certain post actions. So for example, this test method is passed, or this method is failure, and some other method is there, so that is also skipped. So based upon this result of this test method, I want to execute, or I want to perform certain action. So this is called post actions. So if you want to perform these post actions based on the result of these test methods, I need to use listeners concept from TestNG. So these actions can be performed only through TestNG listeners methods. So to implement this particular thing, so TestNG provided different type of interfaces and classes. And again, those interfaces and classes contains a lot of predefined methods. And those methods we have to integrate with our test cases. So first of all, let us see what is listener. So listener is a kind of a interface or set of methods, and those methods will be automatically triggered based upon the result of your test methods, right? So that's the basic concept of TestNG listeners. So what are the different types of listeners we have? So we have different types of listeners we have. So before going to this, this is I have just captured the screenshot, and you can understand how the listeners works. Suppose if any test case is failure, and we can perform some certain action, or suppose passed, or we can perform some other action, something like this, or skipped or started. So based upon the test case status, we can perform certain action. So that can be done by using listeners. So when you come to the types of listeners, so I test the listener. So there are so many types of listeners we have, but I test listener is a very popularly used listener. So let's go to TestNG official website, and in TestNG official website, just go to here and go to documentation, and here we can see TestNG listeners, and here I test listener. These are the different types of listeners, guys. So I annotation transformation, I annotation transformer, and I hookable, or I reporter, I suit listener. These are the different types of listener classes are available. So this is a very commonly used listener class, I test listener. So let's go to Java doc here, and here they have given lots of things. So what are the different methods are available inside this listener? So on test start, on test success, on test failure, on test skip, and so on. So these are the different methods are available inside this particular I test listener. And basically this is a interface, a Java interface. So we have to implement these methods. Whatever methods they have provided, and basically these methods are abstract methods, so we have to implement them according to our requirement. So let's see how we can implement this listeners for your test cases. So as we understood, these methods will be executed based upon your status of your test methods, right? So let's implement this practically. First of all, let's go to intelliJ, and here I'm going to create a new test case first, and then I will create TestNG methods, and then we'll see how to associate them. So I'll create a new package under SRC, and let's take a new package, and I will name it as listeners, then okay. And inside this package, I'll create a new test case, and I'm named this as I can just name it as listener test. And inside this test, I'm going to implement 3 different methods, which is representing 3 different statuses. Like first method, I will make it pass, other method I will make it is failure, and the other one is skipped. So 3 different statuses I'm going to show you now. So let's create one method called void test1. Now inside this method, I'll write a small message. I can just say system dot out dot println, and here this is test1 I'm printing, and I want to make this test method pass. So by default, if I don't have any assert command, so by default it will be passed, or else you can just put one assert command, assert dot assert equals, and here I can say something called a. I want to compare with a, so both are equal, right? So obviously my test method will pass. So I'll define this with the rate test annotation from TestNG, right? So this is one test method which will be passed according to this assert command. And now I'll create one more test method. So let's say test2, and this is your test2, and here I'll make it as failure. So I can just say B here. So both are not equal, so obviously your test method will be failed. And I will also create one more test method. I want to skip it. So here I'll say test3. This is your test3, and I want to skip this. So if you want to skip this particular method, you have to just write some throw exception. So if you want to skip this method, I can just write throw new skip exception. Sorry, throw new skip exception. I can throw it skip exception, and you can just specify some name. So let's say, so let this is skip exception. Okay, something you have can type here. So basically what this statement will do is this statement will skip this particular test method, right? So now I have created three different test methods. One is pass, one will be failure, and one will be skip. Let's execute this test case alone. Right click, run listener test. So if you run this particular test case, so we can see how these test methods are executed. So now we can see the test1 is pass, test2 is failure, and test3 not part of here in the structure because test3 is skipped. So if you want to see clearly status, here you can see. So select this suite, complete suite, sample listener test, and here you can see. So this is test1, this test2 is printed, and here test2 is failure. So it is giving the failure log here. And test3 message is printed, but that is ignored, right? So now these are the three different statuses we got it from these three test methods. Now, based on the status of these test methods, I want to execute certain number of post actions. So that can be done by using TestNG listeners. So what I can do is I can just create one more listener class here. Let's right click here, new Java class. Then I will name it as custom listener. Then okay. So whenever I'm creating this class, I need to implement itest result interface, right? So where is your itest result interface? So itest result interface is here. So as I said, so all these methods are come under itest listener interface. So this interface contains all these methods: on start, on finish, on test failure, on test skip, on test start, on test success. Let's see when these methods will be triggered. So on start, so by default these methods will be taken some parameters like itest context and itest result. So these messages, because these objects will hold the statuses of your test methods. So when these methods will be executed, so on start method invoked after the test class is instantiated and before any configuration method is called, and on finish invoked after all the tests have run and all their configuration methods have been called. So on test failure will invoke each time when a test failed. So whenever a test fails, immediately this particular method will be triggered. And whenever a test method is skipped, immediately on test skip method will be triggered. And similarly, whenever a test method is started, then on test start method will be triggered. Then if any method is passed, then on test success will be triggered. So these methods automatically triggered. So let's implement these methods now. So we have to implement these methods. So that we need to implement itest listener. These are all abstract methods. So here I'm using a concept of inheritance. Let's say implements itest listener, right? So as soon as we have done this, we have to implement all the methods which are coming from this particular itest listener. So the first method is we have to use exactly the same definition. We should not get our own definition. So let's say public void on start. So this is the first method. So this will take itest context as a parameter, and for that we need to just create one argument. Let's create one argument. Let's say org. Some argument is required. Right, inside this method, I'll just write a simple message. Let's say system.out.println starts test execution. So this particular method will start only one time before executing all the tests. So here I'm using this arg because I want to just, if you want to display the suit name, you can just use it on start method, or else we don't require it. So just I'm printing the name. All right. And similarly, I'll also implement other methods. So this particular method will execute. Here I'm putting a comment. This belongs to iTest listener and will execute before starting of test set or batch. All right. Similarly, I will also implement other method, that is public void on finish. This will also take the same parameter and argument, and here I can say argument dot get name. So this particular method will give you the name of the test method. So whichever test method, right? So on finish. So on finish will execute after starting of test or test set or batch. So this will execute before, and this will execute after completion of all the test methods. Right, so on start and on finish. Now come to the method level. So every method starting, or sometimes it will start and maybe it will pass, fail, or skip. So how we can handle these statuses? So here we have another method called on test start. So this will also take iTest result as parameter, iTest result, and argument 0. And here I'll say system.out.println starts test. Some message I'm printing here. This is on test start, and we have another method called on test skipped. So this is another method called on test skipped. So this will also take a parameter iTest result argument, and here internal printing skipping test. So but actually we have to write some action steps here whenever a test method is failure or skipped or passed. So normally we will write the code here to send the logs to your reports and send the status messages to the report, right? So this is on test skip. So the last method we have on test success. This is another method. So this particular method will execute as soon as your test method is passed. And finally we have another method called on test to failure. So this method will be executed as soon as your test is failure. So these are most important: on test start, on test skip, on test success, on test failure. So these methods will be executed whenever your test case status is passed, or whenever a test method is started, on test start will execute. So whenever your test is skipped, then skip will execute. Then whenever your test method is passed or successful, then on test success method will execute. Then if any test method is failure, then on test failure will be executed. So there is also one more method is available. So that is not much important. So I can just leave this message as it is. I'm not going to implement this, but we have to define this, because even though if you're not implementing this body, we have to define that method, because iTest listener is an interface. So whenever you're trying to implement this interface, we must address all the methods within the class. Okay, so we must address all the methods within the class, even though we haven't implemented those methods. So that's the reason I kept this particular method as it is. So now this is your listener class. So these methods will be triggered automatically. But how it will happen? So how we can integrate this listener test case and this custom listener Java. So to associate these two classes, we need to add one parameter at the test case level. So listener test. So here I'll add one parameter at the class level. So here I need to add @ listeners, and this is the annotation which we need to add at the class level. So @ listeners, and here we need to specify the in which package our test listener custom listener class is available. Specify that package name. So my package name is listeners dot custom listeners, right? So this is my listener class I created. So dot custom listeners dot, it will show you here. So custom listeners dot, this is a class. So we need to add this particular annotation at the class level. So then whenever these methods are executing, starting or passing or failure or skipping, immediately the methods which are defined in the custom listener class will be executed. So let's execute this test case now. run listener test. Right, so now it is started. All right, so now it is executed. Now we can see, so one test is failure, one test pass, one is ignored, right? But what about the messages from listener class? So see this, these are the messages we got it from listener class. So starting test, so test 1 is started and passed, and again starting test 2 and printed that message and it is failure. So here it is giving the failure message, and if you come down again, test 3 started. So this is these messages coming from TestNG listener class, and this is a message of test 3 method, and finally this is also skipped. So these messages are coming from listener class case. So as soon as my test is started or passed or failed or skipped, so immediately the listener class methods have been triggered and they have executed. And the first two methods like on start, on finish, so these two methods execute only one time. So on start is executed only one time here, so before executing all the tests, and then finally on finish is also executed only one time after completion of all the tests, right? So this is how we can just use this listener class inside your test case, and by adding this as at the rate listeners annotation, we can associate the listener class with your test case. So this is one way of integrating your listener class with your test case class. Now there is another way we can also integrate using TestNG XML file. So let me also show you that particular approach. Let me just close this and I will create an XML file. So what I can do is take this class listener test and create a new TestNG XML. Okay, now sync this project, then it will create a new TestNG XML file. So I'm just reformatting this. So this is your TestNG XML file which is generated, which contains the 3 different methods, right? And for now I'm just removing these methods. So that's fine. So now this is your class I'm going to execute. So if I run this particular XML file, normally your test case will execute, but listener class will not execute. So if you want to integrate test case along with the listener class using XML file, right? So you don't have to specify this particular annotation in your test. So this is not required. So if you want to integrate both using XML file, right? So I'm just commenting this for now. So now listener test is different and custom listeners.java is different. So now I need to integrate them using XML file. So in XML file anyway, listener test will execute. So now I need to add one more tag here to integrate the listener class. So before test is started, so here I will add a new tag called listeners. Okay, so inside this listeners tag, we have to add one more tag called listener, and the class name attribute we have to specify. So where is my listener class is present under listeners package dot custom listener. So this is my package, right? So this is a new tag which we need to add, guys. So this is the only new tag which we need to add into the XML file. So now you can run this XML file and it will also trigger all the methods from this is custom listener, right? So listeners dot custom listeners, right? So as soon as I have executed this XML file along with this listener test class, parallelly this listener class methods also will be triggered. So this is another approach. So using this particular annotation at the rate listener annotation, we can integrate listener class, or we can also integrate within XML file. So let's execute this XML file. Now we will also get the same results. All right, so now again we got the same thing. So we can start a test execution. This on start message, this is on test start message, and this output of that method, test method, and this is a on test success message output, and again started message from test 2, and test 2 is failure, so we got the log message here, and test 3 test 2 failed, and test 3 is started and test 3 is printed and it is ignored because this is skipped. So these messages are coming from listener class, right? So based upon the test results, we can trigger different methods, and in those methods we need to write the post actions. So post actions means after execution of your test methods, what should be done. So should be part of your TestNG listeners methods. Okay, so this is another very useful interface we have in TestNG. So by which we can create this listener, we can implement these listener class methods according to our requirement. All right. So there are two methods I have told you. So first one is without having XML file, we can just add this listener annotation at the class level and specify the listener class. And the other one is through XML file, we can integrate, and in the XML file we need to add a new listener tag, and inside this listener tag here we have to add one attribute called class-name, and here we specify the listener class. All right, so that's all guys. So that's all for this video. So thanks for watching.